To remove the rear cover, first remove the stand. Use a fingernail or a flathead tool to pry off the rubber screw covers at the bottom corners of the rear cover. There are two captured Phillips No. 2 screws at the bottom edge of the rear cover that help secure the rear cover to the unit. Turn each screw about a quarter turn until the corner of the cover releases up. Pry the bottom of the cover up and partially remove the rear cover from the PC. The optical drive is attached to the rear cover, and its connector will prevent full removal of the rear cover. In order to fully remove the rear cover from the unit for any reason, disconnect the optical drive cable from the rear of the optical drive. Pull the optical drive connector out of the cable guides on the inside of the rear cover. The rear cover may now be fully removed from the unit. If installing a new rear cover, remove the existing optical drive from the old rear cover and install it on the new rear cover. To replace the rear cover, if it has been fully removed, first replace the optical drive connector into its cable guides on the rear cover and reattach it to the rear of the optical drive. The rear cover has several tabs along its outer edge that fit under hooks along the outer lip of the panel assembly. To replace the rear cover, align the top tabs of the cover under their hooks on the PC. Press the cover firmly around the edges until all tabs have snapped into place. Note, you will not need to tighten the bottom screws upon replacement of the cover. The rubber screw covers each have a nub on one side that aligns into a notch in the screw well. To replace the covers, align each cover nub with its notch and press the cover into the screw well until the screw cover is flush with the rear cover. To remove the stand hinge, first remove the stand and partially remove the rear cover. Remove the 5 Phillips No. 2 screws securing the stand hinge to the motherboard EMI shield. Remove the stand hinge from the unit. The stand hinge has two small holes that fit over alignment pegs on the motherboard EMI shield. To replace the stand hinge, align the holes over their alignment pegs. Secure the stand hinge to the motherboard EMI shield with its 5 Phillips No. 2 screws. To remove the optical drive, first remove the stand and partially remove the rear cover. Detach the optical drive connector from the drive. Remove the Phillips No. 2 screw that secures the optical drive to the rear cover. Slide the optical drive and its attached bezel out the side of the rear cover. If replacing the optical drive, remove the small bracket and side bezel from the drive. To remove the bracket, detach the single Phillips No. 1 screw at the rear of the bracket and pull the bracket away from the drive. To remove the bezel, use a straightened paper clip or similar tool to force eject the optical drive tray. Pry on the tabs securing the bezel to the drive and pull the bezel firmly off of the drive. If installing a new optical drive, attach the bezel and bracket from the old drive to the new drive. The bezel has 4 hooked tabs. That fit into 4 slots on the front of the optical drive. Press the tabs into the slots until the bezel is secure. The rear bracket has a small alignment tab that fits into a hole on the rear of the drive. Press the tab into its hole and secure the bracket to the rear of the drive with its Phillips number 1 screw. Make sure the arrow stenciled on the bracket is aligned to the label side of the drive. To replace the optical drive, slide the optical drive back into its bay on the rear cover. Replace the Phillips number 2 screw to secure the optical drive to the rear cover. Replace the optical drive connector to the rear of the drive. To remove the power button board, first remove the stand and partially remove the rear cover. Flip down the latch for the power button flat ribbon connector and pull the connector out of its socket on the board. Pull back on the black hooked retaining tab over the power button board, then slide the board out of its slot on the panel assembly. The power button board fits into a slot on the panel assembly. With a hooked retaining tab that helps secure it in place. To replace the power button board, slide the board into its slot until the retaining tab rests over the top of the board. Insert the flat ribbon connector into its socket on the board. Flip up the latch to secure the connector to the board. To remove the webcam, first remove the stand and fully remove the rear cover. Detach the 2 Phillips number 2 screws that secure the webcam bracket to the LCD panel assembly. Pull up on the edges of the webcam bracket and partially pull the webcam assembly out of the unit. Remove the tape over the connector to the webcam board. Detach the connector from the webcam to fully remove the webcam assembly from the PC. Carefully pry the webcam board off of its bracket with a straight-edged tool. Note, in units with a 3D webcam, it will take some extra force to pry off the webcam. There are 2 very small holes on the webcam board that align over small locator pins on the webcam bracket. The hole and pin locations differ between HD and 3D webcams. For units with an HD webcam, there is also a CON stencil on the bracket to indicate the side of the bracket for the connector side of the webcam. To replace the board to the bracket, align the holes of the board over their pins and press the adhesive into place. There are two small holes on the webcam bracket assembly that align over two alignment pegs on the panel assembly. To replace the webcam bracket, first reattach the webcam connector to the board. Replace the tape covering the webcam connector. Press the holes of the webcam bracket over their alignment pegs on the panel assembly. Replace the two Phillips No. 2 screws to secure the webcam bracket in the PC. To remove the left microphone if installed in the unit, first remove the stand and fully remove the rear cover. Detach the Phillips No. 2 screw that secures the left microphone to the top of the unit. Partially pull off the left microphone. Detach the microphone's interconnector from the side of the microphone to fully remove the left microphone from the unit. There is a small hole on the left microphone that aligns over a small locator pin at the top of the unit. To replace the left microphone, first replace the microphone's interconnector to the side of the left microphone. Place the hole on the microphone over its locator pin. Secure the left microphone to the top of the unit with its Phillips No. 2 screw. To remove the right microphone if installed in the unit, first remove the stand and fully remove the rear cover. Detach the motherboard connector from the side of the right microphone. Detach the Phillips No. 2 screw that secures the right microphone to the top of the unit. Partially pull off the right microphone. Detach the microphone's interconnector from the side of the microphone to fully remove the right microphone from the unit. There is a small hole on the right microphone that aligns over a small locator pin at the top of the unit. To replace the right microphone, first replace the microphone's interconnector to the side of the right microphone. Place the hole on the microphone over its locator pin. Secure the right microphone to the top of the unit with its Phillips No. 2 screw. Replace the motherboard connector to the side of the microphone. To remove the hard drive, first remove the stand and partially remove the rear cover. Detach the connector from the side edge of the hard drive. Remove the Phillips No. 2 screw that secures the hard drive cage to the PC. Slide the cage up in the direction of the arrow stenciled on the cage and remove it from the unit. To remove a 3.5-inch drive or 2.5-inch drive tray from the cage, detach the 4 Phillips No. 2 screws on the sides of the hard drive cage. Note that the screws are different than screws used for other system components. Pull the cage off of the drive, or pull the 2.5-inch drive tray out of the cage. To remove a 2.5-inch drive from its tray, use a slender-barreled screwdriver to access the 4 Phillips No. 2 screws on the tray and slide the drive out of the tray. If replacing a 2.5-inch hard drive, slide the 2.5-inch drive into its tray, engaging the connector edge of the drive with the port on the tray. Replace the 4 Phillips screws to secure the hard drive to the tray. To replace the 3.5-inch hard drive or 2.5-inch drive tray in the cage, align the drive into the cage so that the connector ports of the drive are available through their cutout on the cage. Replace the 4 Phillips screws to secure the hard drive to the cage. The hard drive cage has a tab on each side that fits under a tab on the middle frame of the PC. There is also a large metal tab on the bottom of the cage that fits under 2 tabs on the middle frame. To replace the hard drive cage into the PC, place the tabs on the cage near their tabs on the PC, then slide the cage down until secure. Replace the Phillips No. 2 screw to secure the hard drive cage in the PC. Replace the connector to the drive. To remove the LCD panel kit, first remove the stand. Fully remove the rear cover. Remove the left and right microphones if present in the unit. Partially remove the webcam from the top of the unit. Detach the backlight connector from the rear of the panel. Detach the flat ribbon connector from the power button board. Detach the LVDS connector from the motherboard. Remove the 12 Phillips No. 2 screws on the main side of the middle frame that secure the middle frame to the panel assembly. Remove the 2 Phillips No. 2 screws on each side of the middle frame as well. Each screw location is indicated by a stencil of an arrow with a single dot inside. Lift the middle frame assembly carefully off of the panel assembly. If replacing the LCD panel kit, remove the old power button and LVDS cable from the LCD panel and install the power button and LVDS cable onto the new panel assembly. There are a few locator pegs at the top of the panel assembly that align into holes on the middle frame. To replace the middle frame to the panel assembly, first have the panel face down on the work surface. Align the holes on the middle frame over the locator pegs, feeding the LVDS cable up through its access hole, and gently press the middle frame into place over the panel. Secure the middle frame to the panel assembly with its 4 Phillips No. 2 screws on the sides of the middle frame and the 12 Phillips No. 2 screws on the main part of the middle frame. Replace the LVDS connector to the motherboard. Replace the flat ribbon connector to the power button board. Replace the backlight connector to the panel. Replace the webcam at the top of the unit. To remove the touch panel kit, first remove the stand. Fully remove the rear cover. Remove the left and right microphones if present in the unit. Partially remove the webcam from the top of the unit. Detach the backlight connector from the rear of the panel. Detach the flat ribbon connector from the power button board. Detach the LVDS connector from the motherboard. Detach the touch control cable from the touch control board. Remove the 12 Phillips No. 2 screws on the main side of the middle frame that secure the middle frame to the panel assembly. Remove the 2 Phillips number 2 screws on each side of the middle frame as well. Each screw location is indicated by a stencil of an arrow with a single dot inside. Lift the middle frame assembly carefully off of the panel assembly. If replacing the touch panel kit, remove the old power button and LVDS cable and install them into the new panel assembly. There are a few locator pegs at the top of the panel assembly that align into holes on the middle frame. To replace the middle frame to the panel assembly, first have the panel face down on the work surface. Align the holes on the middle frame over the locator pegs, feeding the LVDS cable up through its access hole. And gently press the middle frame into place over the panel. Secure the middle frame to the panel assembly with its 4 Phillips number 2 screws on the sides of the middle frame and the 12 Phillips number 2 screws on the main part of the middle frame. Replace the connector to the touch control board. Replace the LVDS connector to the motherboard. Replace the flat ribbon connector to the power button board. Replace the backlight connector to the panel. Replace the webcam at the top of the unit. To remove the motherboard EMI shield, first remove the stand and partially remove the rear cover. Remove the 5 Phillips number 2 screws securing the motherboard EMI shield to the PC. The screw locations are indicated by a stencil of an arrow with no circles inside. Tip up the inside edge of the shield and remove the motherboard EMI shield from the unit. The motherboard EMI shield has 2 tabs on its side edge, which fit into 2 slots on the PC's middle frame. There are also a few small holes on the shield that fit over alignment pegs on the middle frame. To replace the motherboard EMI shield, align the tabs into their slots, then press the other side of the shield down into place. The pegs on the PC should be aligned through the holes on the shield when correctly installed. Secure the shield with its 5 Phillips number 2 screws. To remove these speakers, first remove the stand. Partially remove the rear cover. And remove the motherboard EMI shield. Detach the speaker's connector to the motherboard. Detach the 2 wide head Phillips number 2 screws, securing each of the speakers to the PC. Pull one speaker off its standoffs and free the speaker's interconnector from the cable guides at the bottom of the middle frame. Before removing the second speaker from its standoffs. To replace these speakers, align the first speaker over its screw standoffs on the middle frame. Tuck the speaker's interconnector behind its cable guides on the bottom of the PC. Place the second speaker into place on its standoffs. Secure the 2 speakers with their wide head Phillips number 2 screws. Reconnect the speaker's connector to the motherboard. To remove the system fan, first remove the stand. Partially remove the rear cover and remove the motherboard EMI shield. Detach the system fan connector to the motherboard. Detach the 3 Phillips No. 2 system screws securing the fan to the PC. Remove the fan from the unit. To replace the system fan, align the fan over its standoffs in the PC. Secure the fan with its 3 Phillips No. 2 system screws. Replace the fan connector to the motherboard. To remove the thermal module, first remove the stand. Partially remove the rear cover. Remove the motherboard EMI shield and the system fan. Detach the captive Phillips No. 2 screws over the CPU and GPU, if present in the unit, in the order indicated by the stencils on the thermal module. Loosen the captured Phillips No. 2 screw at the radiator end of the thermal module. Carefully lift the thermal module out of the unit. Before replacing the thermal module, first clean off the thermal grease from the CPU the GPU if present, and the thermal module. Apply new thermal grease or thermal pads to the CPU and GPU if present. Carefully align the thermal module back into the unit, positioning it carefully above the CPU and GPU if present. Tighten the Phillips No. 2 screws for the thermal module over the CPU and GPU if present in the unit, in the order indicated by the stencils on the module. Tighten the Phillips No. 2 screw near the radiator end of the module. To remove the wireless LAN board, first remove the stand, partially remove the rear cover, and remove the motherboard EMI shield. Carefully snap off the antenna connectors from the board. Detach the Phillips No. 1 screw securing the board in place. The board will pop up. Remove the board. The wireless LAN board has a notch offset from the center that aligns over a key in its motherboard socket. To replace the wireless LAN board, angle the board into its motherboard socket at a 30-degree angle and press down. Hold it down while replacing the screw. Reattach the antenna connectors to the board. The antenna connectors are labeled 1 and 2 and should be connected to the corresponding 1 and 2 labeled ports on the board. To remove the wireless LAN antennas, first remove the stand. Fully remove the rear cover. Separate the panel assembly from the middle frame assembly. Remove the Motherboard EMI Shield from the middle frame assembly. Carefully snap off the antenna connectors from the wireless LAN board. Pull the antennas through the small access hole near the motherboard to the other side of the middle frame. Remove the antennas from the cable guides on the back side of the middle frame. Pull each antenna connector through its access hole back to the main side of the middle frame. Detach the single Phillips number 1 screw that secures each antenna to the middle frame. Pry off each antenna from its mounting location on the middle frame. Each antenna mounting location has a small locator peg on the underside of a metal tab that aligns into a small cutout on the edge of each antenna. The antennas are labeled R and L and should be installed in the corresponding stenciled location on the metal frame. To replace the wireless LAN antennas, slip the cutout edge under the metal tab to engage the cutout over its locator peg and press the other side of the antenna down over the top of the other mounting tab. Secure each antenna with its Phillips number 1 screw. Feed each antenna connector through its access hole near the mounting location to the back side of the middle frame. Secure the antennas into the cable guides on the rear of the middle frame that lead to the motherboard area access hole. Feed both antennas through the motherboard area access hole to pull them back to the main side of the middle frame. Reattach the antenna connectors to the board. The antenna connectors are labeled 1 and 2 and should be connected to the corresponding 1 and 2 labeled ports on the board. To remove system memory, first remove the stand, partially remove the rear cover, and remove the motherboard EMI shield. To remove the SO-DIMM memory module, gently pull out on the retaining lever located on each side of the module. The module will pop up from its socket. Pull the memory module out of the socket. There is a small notch on one side of each SO-DIMM memory module that fits over a small tab on one side of each SO-DIMM socket. To replace an SO-DIMM memory module, angle the module to about 30 degrees into its socket, engaging the notch into its socket tab. Press the module down into place until the retaining levers snap into position over the sides of the module. To remove the CPU in units with an Intel CPU-based motherboard, first remove the stand. Partially remove the rear cover. Remove the Motherboard EMI Shield, the system fan, and the thermal module. Press down to release the CPU load lever from its retention tab, and pull the load lever and load plate away from the socket. Identify pin 1 on the socket by the mark on the corner of the socket stencil. Line up the pin 1 corner of the Intel CPU removal replacement tool over the socket. Press down on the plunger of the removal tool to pick up the CPU from the socket and remove the tool and the CPU from the motherboard. To replace the CPU, first identify pin 1 position on the microprocessor by noting the yellow mark on the corner of the chip assembly. Make sure the Intel CPU staging tool side pins are set to the correct socket type for the CPU. For this unit, it is LGA1151. Place the CPU into the Intel CPU staging tool. When correctly inserted, the small notches on the side of the CPU should align over the side pins on the staging tool. Place the removal replacement tool over the stage, lining up the pin 1 triangles on each tool. Press down on the removal replacement tool to pick the CPU up from the stage. Align the removal replacement tool again to pin 1 on the motherboard CPU socket. Press the plunger on the removal replacement tool to release the CPU into the socket. Swing the load plate down. Lock the load lever under its retaining tab to secure the microprocessor into place. CMOS factory settings should be restored as a first step before replacing the system motherboard. To restore CMOS factory settings, first remove the stand. Partially remove the rear cover. And remove the Motherboard EMI Shield. Remove the battery from the motherboard. Wait 30 seconds. Replace the battery to the motherboard. CMOS factory settings are now reset. Note that you will now need to enter System BIOS and reset the clock in BIOS after this procedure. To remove the motherboard, first remove the stand. Partially remove the rear cover. Remove the Motherboard EMI Shield, the wireless LAN board, system memory, the system fan, and the thermal module. If the motherboard has an Intel CPU, remove the CPU. When removing the CPU, install a socket cover on the load plate window before replacing the load plate over the socket. Detach all system connectors to the motherboard. Remove the 7 Phillips No. 2 screws securing the motherboard to the PC. Lift the motherboard off of the PC. Place the motherboard in an anti-static bag. The motherboard audio port on the bottom of the motherboard aligns into a small metal cutout on the PC. To replace the motherboard, carefully align the audio port into its cutout. And place the motherboard down onto its standoffs, clearing any connectors away from the side of the board. Replace the 7 Phillips No. 2 screws to secure the motherboard to the middle frame. Reattach all system connectors to the board.